Here we go with the stories of the day in the National Football League. And there's always something, even in the slow weeks. This is one that I missed, and we were all in Super Bowl mode. Tua Tagovailoa made the rounds 2 days before the game. I got an email last night from a guy who is a judo expert. He was an Olympian. He's got a judo center. Jason Morris, I think, is his name, although I'm sorry if I'm not remembering. It's been a busy day already. But he had emailed me in late December after Tua's most recent concussion, and he said, hey, this guy should consider judo because they teach you how to fall. That's one of the skills you need to have when you're in a judo competition because you fall down, and you got to fall the right way. You're going to get injured as you fall. It's something that Tua and other football players should consider. And look, I look at every email that comes to me, but I can't act on any of them, especially as we're getting toward the end of the regular season. So I just kind of, it was one of those like, oh, this is interesting. And then you move on and you forget that you even got it. He reached out to me last night. He said, hey, I saw something about Tua talking about judo, and he wanted me to be aware of it. So I went and did the research, and lo and behold, he said during his Super Bowl rounds at the media center that he's studying judo once a week in an effort to learn how to fall down and not strike his head against the turf. Now, I don't know how effective it'll be, Myles, but it's smart, and it's a concession that he needs to do something because the physics aren't in his favor. When you're 6 feet tall and built like me, which is kind of how he's built, you're going to get thrown to the ground by some big, strong guys. And you better have a plan for not letting your head hit the turf because that's how he got each of his 3 concussions in 2022.
Right. And in order for him to keep playing and in order for him to be a good quarterback, he's got to be available. All right. And I mean, it's the cliche thing, but the coaches always talk about this. Your best ability is your availability. And so it says nothing of Tagovailoa's ability to be a good quarterback if he's not out there. And, you know, I want him to be healthy. I want him to avoid brain injuries. I think we should all want that. So if this is an avenue for him to be able to accomplish that, then fantastic. Let's see it. And I hope that it works. You know, if he's able to learn these techniques that are going to be able to help him when he goes to the ground, avoid the kinds of hits to the head that he has taken, that's awesome. And I think that that's something we should all be rooting for because otherwise he's not going to be playing. Because you cannot have him out there if he's going to continue to suffer concussions. And frankly, a doctor may not even clear him if he has another one.
Well, that's the thing. There will be a concussion at some point that becomes the last one in that he won't be cleared by any doctor. There will be no doctor who put his or her name at the bottom of the piece of paper saying, I authorize the continued participation in professional tackle football by this specific patient. And it's a combination of avoiding the hit and avoiding hitting the head on the turf. You got to get rid of the football. You got to protect yourself when you're not a larger quarterback. We rarely saw Drew Brees take big hits. Russell Wilson, who's thicker than Tua Tagovailoa, same height, but there's a thickness to Russell Wilson that Tua doesn't have. He has an instinct for how to absorb a hit in a way that doesn't cause him to hit the ground and snap his neck back against the turf. You've never seen that happen to Russell Wilson. So I used to compare him to Barry Sanders in that Barry Sanders had a way to just kind of instinctively go with the hit that came his way, and he'd land on the ground and he'd never get injured or rarely get injured. Russell Wilson, when he ran a lot early in his career, it was the same thing. But Tua, we see that head hit the ground. We saw it happen 3 times this year. Twice we know he had concussions. The third time, most of us believe that he did. And that's going to be the challenge. And Myles, here's the other side of it too. And I don't know enough about judo to know how judo training is going to properly simulate when he gets put into a game. But I doubt that he's going to face something as rough and tumble in his judo training that he's going to see when he's out on the field. And if he does, at some point, his head's going to potentially hit the ground as he learns how to properly fall. I mean, you don't just show up and say, teach me how to fall, and you start doing it, and every time it works perfectly. At some point, he may hit his head on the ground and suffer a concussion during this judo training if they're going to do it right and prepare him to properly avoid these kinds of things during games.
Well, it's like my grandpa always says about the man who went into the library and read all the books he could on swimming, and then he got into the pool and he drowned. It's because you can have all the preparation that you want in a certain situation, or you can read about it, but then once you get into the actual situation, it makes it very different. So, I mean, it's not that Tagovailoa doesn't know how to play football, but if you're talking about judo training, that's not football, right? It's just not. So if you can learn to fall in that situation, great, but it's going to be very different when somebody who is 275 to 300 pounds is coming full speed at you and then hits you, and then you fall back, or you have to get twisted down in a certain way like he did in Cincinnati. It is a very different proposition.
Well, and it reminds me of Tim Tebow's pre-draft experience from now 13 years ago, when we heard so much about he's changing his throwing motion. He's changing his throwing motion. He's changing his throwing motion. And then you go out and play, and your throwing motion is the same because your muscle memory takes over. Your lifetime of playing football takes over. And the judo stuff, or the deliberate tightening of the throwing motion so it's not a slow motion catapult, that goes out the window because you go back to the things that you know from playing football. That's going to be the other challenge too. But implicit in the judo training, Myles, is an acknowledgement by Tua Tagovailoa and those close to him that this isn't sustainable. And it makes even more compelling the question of whether or not the Dolphins will sign him to a long-term deal. I doubt they will. And whether or not they'll pick up his fifth-year option. And I don't expect them to do that either. They need to see that he can get through a season healthy before they make a full commitment to him for 2024 and beyond.
That's interesting, Mike, because, I mean, that Tagovailoa, when he's healthy, he can play. And so, I mean, I think about this versus Daniel Jones last year, where it was, well, he's had some health issues, but we also aren't sure if he can play. So if that's the case, then I totally understood why the Giants, especially with the new regime, were like, oh, we don't need to pick up this option. But you don't think that the Dolphins are going to pick up the option, even though we know that Tagovailoa can play? It's mostly going to be the health issues that factor into it.
I think that would be one of the potential issues because, as you said, the greatest ability is availability. And this is a guy who missed 4 games last year, left another game early, the Bengals game, played through a game while he was clearly impaired, the Packers game, and then the Bills game he left and came back when he was wobbly and possibly impaired in that game, although they managed to beat the Bills that day in September. So I think it's something they need to carefully evaluate. And they need to see whether or not he can protect himself before they make a major commitment in dollars beyond this year. Because the thing about the fifth-year option now, the moment it's exercised, it's fully guaranteed. It used to be just guaranteed for injury. It's fully and completely guaranteed, and it will be higher for Tua. They changed the formula a few years ago. Qualifying for the Pro Bowl is a factor that drives it up. He's going to have a higher fifth-year option than he otherwise would have had if he'd been on the bench. Like Jordan Love's fifth-year option is going to be very low because he's barely played. Tua is going to be at the other end of the spectrum, and they were both first-round picks in 2020. So that's part of it as well. I go back to the talking points and the quotes from Chris Greer, the GM of the team, Mike McDaniel, the head coach, that he's our guy, he's our guy, he's our guy. Fine, pick up the option now. There's no reason not to pick up the option now. May's just a couple of months away. You want us to believe he's your guy? Pick up the option. The fact that they haven't makes me think that they're considering whether or not they need to do it. Why do it now if we have any doubt whatsoever? If they had no doubt, Myles, they would do it.
Well, I mean, that's certainly something that they're going to be asked about next week at the Combine, as you alluded to it. So I guess we can find out more about that next week then.
Yeah, maybe we won't have Mike McDaniel on the show because of that, although he was one of my favorite guests last year when we had him. I mean, I could listen to that guy forever. It's kind of like Sean Payton. It's different content. It's a different delivery, but it's the idea that you sit there and you get mesmerized by what the guy's saying. You forget that at some point he's going to stop and you got another question ready. And I fall into that trap with really good interviews. I fall into that trap where you become Chris Farley and you're like, that was awesome. And you have no idea what to say next because you just loved hearing what the guy had to say.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.